Okay, so what I was saying is now that I've got these set-driven keys created I've created a relationship between this bend attribute that I created and the curvature attribute of the bend 1 node, then I can manipulate that with this attribute rather than having to navigate to that bend 1 node, which would be a real pain if you're an animator. So we're going to do the same thing with the squash attribute. Okay, so if I set driven key window, I still got my toothbrush, which I just realized I misspelled. My toothbrush control selected. I need to select my squash 1, and I'm going to click load driven. Now I've got squash and factor attributes. I need to double check to make sure that the squash is set to 0. It is. And my factor should also be set to 0. It's not, so good thing I double checked. Nice. Again, making sure I have the correct selection. I select the squash attribute and the factor attribute and hit key. Now, I'm going to change my squash to a positive 10 and my factor to whatever I think positive 10 means. I don't know which that should be. I'm going to say that's it. Okay. And I can click key, go back, and change my squash to negative 10, my factor, say right there, key. Now, I've got a squash that I can control, and a bend that I can control. And I forgot to key the bend to the negative direction. So, let me go back and do that. So I select my bend node, load driven, select my bend attribute, make sure it's set to negative 10, it is. Click my bend 1, set the curvature to what I think should be backwards. Remember, I set the positive direction to a positive, the forward direction to a positive 120. I'm going to do just the opposite. Usually is a good idea on the negative side of an attribute. Okay? So when you're entering a value into the channel box, you always want to make sure you press enter. Your value is not finalized until you do that. That's another mistake a lot of beginners will make. Okay? So back in my set driven key window, I need to select my bend attribute and my curvature attribute and hit key. Now that bend attribute should be completed. So I'll double check. It's my bend. Yes, that works. And my squash works. Now I need to be able to change my bend direction. So to do that, that's not part of the bend node. That needs to be on the bend handle. So I'll select the bend handle on my hypergraph hierarchy and click load driven, and we've got a problem here. The only keyable attribute is the visibility. Well, if I look at my channel box, that's the only attribute that's not locked. So what I need to do is unlock the appropriate attribute, which in our case is going to be the rotate Y. So if I select rotate Y, right click on it, unlock selected, then I can click on load driven again in that set driven key window. My rotate Y attribute is now available. Okay. So now I have my toothbrush control bend direction attribute selected and my driven toothbrush bend handle attribute, and I want the bend direction to control the rotate Y attribute. Okay, I need to double check to make sure my toothbrush control bend direction is set to 0. It is. So again, double checking my selection. in the set driven key, and for the attributes, I'm going to hit key. Okay? You can see that this transform node in the hypergraph hierarchy is now a trapezoid rather than a rectangle, parallelogram, whatever you want to call it. That means that it's a keyed node. It has animation. Okay? So now I'm going to go back to my bend direction. I'm going to change this attribute to 360. And then I'm going to go to my toothbrush bend handle, rotate Y, and I'm going to add, and here's a shortcut, you'll want to catch this. I want it to rotate 360 degrees, right? But I want to add 360 to a minus 90. So here's the easy way to do that. If you select the attribute, and this is a little bit programmerish, and you type plus equals 360 and press enter, it will add 360 to the number that was already in that field. Okay? So that's a little bit easier way to do that. And then I can click key in my set driven key window. Okay, now if everything's good, I should be able to select my handle here and rotate the direction that bends. So I can bend it to the side if I want to, any direction I want to. I can bend it forward and back, and I can still squash the bristles all I want to. Now the real test of a good rig, let me close that one now, close my set driven key window. The real test of a good rig is if you can scale it by its control. So this one's pretty simple, so it should work. If I switch to my scale tool and scale it up, nothing should go wonky. Everything should still work just fine, which it appears to be. Okay, and it's a lot bigger than it was. Okay. I can make it smaller if I want, and so on and so forth. You should also be able to rotate it any direction you want to and have it act appropriately. And you should even be able to move it around and have it act appropriately. That's how you know you've done a good rig. Okay? So I'm going to reset these. I'm going to zero back out the control. Set my attributes to 0. And then I will save this file. Let's see, I need to create a new project first. I'm going to save it. Here, I'll call this my Maya toothbrush project. Actually, I have to do it here. Maya toothbrush project. Select that. I'm going to create all the default folders and click accept. I'm going to go to file, save scene. It's going to automatically save it to the create a new project within that folder. That's nice. Okay. We'll deal with that later. So I have a new project, scenes folder, and the file type I want to save as is a Maya ASCII. You always want to save it as a Maya ASCII. Okay, it's far less likely to corrupt. And this is my toothbrush underscore rig underscore 01, meaning my first iteration. It's created by a student version, that's fine. If the result gives the path to your file, then